that there's been occasionally public interest, those that are watching. We are unfortunately unable to take direct public comment, but I encourage anyone to please email us at our public information address, and we will respond to your comments. And that email address is public.info@metc.state.mn.us. I know there was interest in commenting specifically on an action that will be in next week's committee agenda related to the procurement of buses. So if you have an interest in that, please send us comments and stay tuned to more conversation. But today, we are going to following up on the meeting of January 20th discussion, and we're looking forward to that. But I'll start by calling us to order. And is it Bridget calling the roll?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can.
All right, Councilmember Atlas Ingebretson. Atlas Ingebretson. Barber.
Here.
Chambliss.
Here.
Cummings.
Here.
Ferguson. Ferguson. Fredson.
Here.
Gonzalez.
Here.
Johnson.
Here.
Lee.
Here.
Lilligren.
Here.
Lindstrom.
Here.
Sterner. Sterner. Vento. Wolf.
Here.
Zarin.
Present.
Cherizelli.
I'm here. All right, welcome everyone. And you've all seen the agenda, and if there's no correction or dispute, we will assume the agenda is approved, which brings us to the main event. I'm really going to hand this off to Michelle Furry and Sarah Maskey, who did such a wonderful job facilitating this conversation a while ago, and we're really going to pick up where we left off, probably review what we discussed, and I'll sit back and participate, and I'm throwing my virtual gavel your way, Michelle, so take it away.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and council members. It's a pleasure to be with you again this afternoon. I am Michelle Fury. I'm the manager of public involvement here at the council, and my role, along with Sarah Maskey, who is one of the outreach and communication staff in our department, will be really to facilitate the conversation today. So we're here to just kind of make sure that we loop back on some of the things we talked about in January and keep moving forward as we begin to hear from you about some of your interests and expectations regarding the 2050 regional plan, which is off in the horizon a bit, but not as far as we would like it to be, I'm guessing. It's coming sooner than we think. So it's a good time for us to start talking about how to structure this work and, begin asking some of the critical questions that are a part of that process. So I know a few of you were here for most of you were here for the January 20th conversation, but there were a couple of you who weren't. So for the benefit of those of you who weren't able to attend on the 20th, I'm just going to go through a little bit of the logistics for today and give you an opportunity to kind of get a sense of how this meeting will flow. Greg, if you have the presentation, you can go ahead and put the slides up. And go ahead and move to the next slide. Thank you. So today we will spend some time reviewing the status and outcomes for this initial conversation, which we've spread over 2 meetings now to really begin the process of hearing from you and listening to your interests related to the 2050 regional planning process. We'll take a few minutes to take a look at some of the things that you talked about in January and to build on that discussion with a handful of other questions that we didn't get to. If you recall, before the January conversation, we sent out a poll on Mentimeter for you to fill out, which allowed you to answer 5 questions that were fairly general in nature, but the idea was to get you to start, applying your big thinking, your best thinking to some of the larger scale regional questions that will be coming up certainly over the next several years. We'll just be building upon that today, and we'll be referring to the Mentimeter responses where appropriate. In the first meeting in January, we did get through the first 2 questions, which is why they are grayed out on the agenda in front of you. So we talked about what it looks like to be an effective steward of regional resources and what is going well and should keep moving forward. And today we'll talk about questions that perhaps we aren't asking ourselves about the long-range future of the region and where there might be unique opportunities for the council to create distinction, leadership, and trust in the region. And then the last question is really one of the key takeaways for today. We want to hear from you about what part you'd like to play in leading the Metropolitan Development Guide. And in some of the Mentimeter responses, we heard certainly a lot about engagement and connecting with your districts, but this is also an opportunity for you to determine if you want to have a more active role in starting to shape some of the work that takes place. And I'll talk through a few options from the last time we did the regional plan, and then we can certainly hear from you on some of your ideas. As a reminder, we're looking to really hear from you. This is an opportunity to hear from you and listen, and all the staff that are engaged in the regional planning process are paying attention and will also receive a summary of the conversation. In the January meeting, I went through the background around the regional planning process, and I'm not planning to review those tonight, but if you do have any questions about that, feel free to ask those and we'll certainly revisit that topic. Sarah will be doing the primary facilitation. We'll have a slightly different method for note taking, but basically you'll see Sarah taking notes so that you can kind of get a sense of how we're capturing what you're saying. And like we did last time, we will certainly give you the summary notes following our discussion so that you have those. Let's see here. One of the things that, just to remind you, as I mentioned, Sarah and I are here to facilitate the conversation. We are not technical experts. So if there are some questions that we can't answer, we'll do our best. But if there are some questions we can't answer, Lisa Barajas is with us today, and she has been willing to answer anything that she can. But we'll also make sure that we take those back and bring you any follow-up that comes from those questions that you might have. One other thing, just for your information, is I will be keeping an eye on who is participating, and I will be trying to call on you. So if you want to raise your hand as part of the meeting, or if you just, even if your camera's on and you want to raise your hand, I'll be watching for who wants to speak during the meeting tonight. And I'm going to be keeping track of making sure that we're getting around to as many folks as possible so that we have a robust conversation with as many council members as are here tonight. So if I haven't heard you say anything, I might call your name and say, is there something that you wanted to say? But I also just encourage you to chime in. This is a really important opportunity for you to just say what's on your mind. So just keep in mind that we'll be making sure that everybody gets a chance to say something. With that, after we have our discussion tonight, we'll do a little bit of a wrap up and talk a little bit about next steps. But as I said, this is just really the beginning of a much longer conversation, and it's an exciting time for us to be starting to consider some of these issues. Next slide, Greg. So the outcomes for today's discussion are really to gain a high-level understanding of the regional planning process and timeline. Again, if we need to revisit those, but this is an opportunity for you to learn about how you can get involved in that process in the next few years, and how and where you'll have an opportunity to lead that conversation. Again, we really want to listen to your expectations and interests and provide time for discussion of your policymaking goals. And then a key takeaway for tonight is to make sure that we are hearing from you about how you want to be involved in future conversations and what the work to guide this regional planning process should look like moving forward. Next slide, Greg. So before we get started, we'll take a few minutes to just kind of talk through some of the major themes that came out of the January conversation to kind of ground us in what we've already heard. And this includes feedback from both the poll that we sent to you as well as the conversation at the meeting in January. And the notes from that were also posted with the agenda if you're interested in reviewing those as we talk tonight. The first question was, what does it look like to be an effective steward of resources? And the 4 key themes that came out of that conversation were about communication, making sure that it's transparent and authentic and that it's intentionally inclusive. That there's a leadership element, including servant leadership and some attention to disparities and systemic racism. Planning, obviously, is a critical part of this whole effort. And making sure that we have areas of focus, that we're clear about outcomes and goals, and that this is a long-term exercise. And then stewardship, particularly as it relates to finite resources, maximizing returns, and safeguarding what is a scarce resource in this region. And then the second question was, what's going well and should keep moving forward? As you see there's a lot of things that we can really be grateful for and proud of that's going well and provides additional opportunities for innovation, for really going further on progress regarding racial disparities, employment, etc. 2020, as you all know, was quite a year of experience with the pandemic, and it taught us what we can do and how we can be flexible and how we can change and perhaps leverage technology. And then there was some commentary about how this model of virtual meetings is actually a really positive opportunity for additional access to some of the discussions and conversations that we're having at the council level. So those were all kind of the in a nutshell, the things that came up in that conversation in January. And those, like I said, those themes and notes have been captured, and we'll be including those in the plans as we move forward. So that brings us to our remaining questions. And really what we want to do tonight before we get started here is just to remind you that this is a conversation. We're here to hear from you. Your thoughts and ideas are really critical to this conversation and to this planning effort. So we're here to facilitate that for you. And Sarah will be walking us through some things before we get started. I wonder if anybody has any quick questions about our process or any of the information I presented so far.
This is Riva.
Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for that recap. I just had a little bit of feedback on the stewardship and also some input. And that is, I saw that there were 2 bullet points that were somewhat similar. The finite resources and scarcity are almost similar to, like one bullet. But I think we could also add, in terms of stewardship / accountability, an important aspect is measurement of our goals and follow up against our goals and our strategies. How are we doing? Because a lot of times, we can be really great at creating policy that sounds really good. It might even have impact, but if we don't follow up on it, we can't see how well we're doing. And that also kind of ties into the measurement aspect.
Right. Great. Thank you. Okay. Well, I think I'm going to stop talking and let Sarah take over and really lead us through the conversation from here forward. Take it away, Sarah. Sarah, we can't hear you. I can't hear you.
Apologies. Thank you. We're all going to do it at some point, right? Greg is going to pin me for everyone, but if you want to see me full screen, there's a little button in your upper right that says layout, and you hit focus, and it will focus on me. So just wanted to let you know that, so you can see hopefully what I'm writing on the wall. Thank you very much for having me back tonight. I'm excited to continue this conversation. And really, it's really great the point that you brought up, Councilmember Chambliss, on the measurement and follow up on our goals, because one of my questions addresses that. So what I have done is I went in and looked at the responses to the Mentimeter poll and tried to pull out some questions that would dig a little deeper into some common themes. And I'm going to do it over questions 3 and 4, because question 3 kind of addresses a little bit of the challenge portion of what we're talking about, and question 4 is more about the opportunities. And as we know, challenges and opportunities go hand in hand. And so I wanted to make sure that we dig a little deeper on some of these questions that have continued to come up throughout the course of this conversation. So the first question I'd like to ask is, how do we dig deeper and more meaningfully into the region's racial disparities? This is a theme that has come across all of the questions, and I just want to get your thoughts and ideas on how we can be improving our work. Molly?
Thank you, Sarah. One way is to be sure that we are asking the people to be at the table, providing input and so forth, rather than us deciding for, that we are deciding with, or that we are hearing with and addressing those disparities, that those who are experiencing them and are experts in that can help guide us into what needs changing and how we might want to change.
Councilmember Lilligren?
Yeah, thanks. I would say to support what Molly just said for sure, and say 2 things, and one of them has to do with data and you know, disaggregating data, seeing good data about diverse communities. And then the other, and it's a little more nebulous, but it's been really moving to the forefront of conversations like this that I'm in at a number of tables. And that, I think, is about truth telling, I guess, is the kind of umbrella I would use, and that we as a unit of government, we as a body are sort of giving ourselves permission and our members permission, and really seeking, you know, opportunities for truth telling about what has led to the conditions that we're in today. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Fredson?
Thank you. I would say asking, you know, individuals and organizations that have deep relationships with community to help facilitate conversation and feedback. And I think there has to be a lot of folks who don't feel either invited or welcome, or that even if they do provide feedback, that we would, I guess, take it seriously and use, you know, input to shape decision making. And so, you know, organizing to some extent.
Councilmember Johnson, go ahead.
Thank you. I second all of those comments, are awesome. And then I would add, I think we should also look for experts and people that are consultants in this field. Just as an example, I know Center for Economic Inclusion is working with businesses and organizations to help get in deep and figure out how to evaluate the systems and do all of the things I think that we're talking about in all of these bullet points. But I think sometimes it's really important that we get outside help that is really the wheelhouse that, you know, these people are working in every day and are experts, and to help us guide it so that, you know, we are, you know, working towards our goals. And then of course, really, I just want to appreciate what Riva said too, is measurement, outcomes, progress, and all that, but seeking some expert help so that we don't have to operate on ourselves if we're not already doctors or physicians, you know, getting some extra help.
Councilmember Vento.
I want to piggyback on what Judy just said. I totally agree. And I think one of the areas of expertise that is often overlooked by all entities is the religious community, and particularly for the BIPOC community. The PBS series on the Black churches was amazing, and I think that there's a lot we can learn as an organization from those religious institutions that will help guide us in not only communicating effectively and authentically, but also in terms of just seriously addressing the issues that we need to address.
Thank you. Any other thoughts about this question? Councilmember Chambliss?
Yeah, so I think keeping in mind that our leaders are always investing for what's important to them. In terms of addressing disparities, I think we need to realign our investments through policy, statutes, mandates, laws to address disparities, and realize that investments are going to happen. We have to decide where we want those to go and where we haven't invested. And where we have not invested sufficiently, we need to fix that. And we know that that's what's leading to some of our disparities, because of the reluctance to invest in the people who are the most vulnerable.
That's great. Thank you. Other thoughts on this question? Going once? Going twice?
Francisco has a comment.
Oh, there it is. Go for it.
Nobody likes me. That's why
I like it.
No.
Not so.
Just to add, to make sure that we are ready to defend or state unequivocally why we're doing all of this. I think that I've seen a lot of pushback from folks that say that, and not internally, I mean from other government entities, that there's too much talk about diversity and racial issues, etc., that it's causing divisions, and that we shouldn't be doing that. I think that just like the folks that say that are not afraid to state that opinion.
So we should not be afraid to state the opinion of why.
We need to actually have this conversation. Yeah. So we need to be able to speak up and speak out loudly and say, this is why we need to do this. This is why we need to target these investments. And I will take it one step further and not be afraid to say, and the people who are saying that this is not needed are wrong. And that's one of the reasons why we are where we are at this point, is because for too long, the naysayers had occupied all the space in the discussion. So it's time to us to really state that we need to move forward on all of these issues regarding the disparities, and the people who are saying otherwise are wrong.
Thank you. That's a really great point.
Chair Zelli?
I just want to follow up on something Councilmember Johnson was and Sue Venter were describing, the Center for Economic Inclusion. There is a regional anti-racism and economic justice trust there. I said it all. That they are.
You might have to say it again.
A regional anti-racism and economic justice trust, which is something the Center for Economic Inclusion has been standing up with public sector institutions. There's a meeting Friday, and then a separate roundtable of private employers. And we're part of that public sector table, not just to learn, but to kind of foster some practice and some partnership. So much of what I think we do at Met Council is in partnership with other local governments. And in fact, many times we bring technical and grants and support that really is leveraged by others. So I always think this is something where we're in the mix, not just in our own bubble. And I think and many times we're following and listening and co-creating, and sometimes we're leading and sometimes we're just supporting. But I think we need to be thoughtful and open to whatever that role is that we can be participating in.
Thank you. I really like those words, following, listening, co-creating. It's a good way to think about partnership, that it's all of the above.
Yeah.
So I'm going to move us on to our second question. And this gets to what Councilmember Chambliss was saying previously. So as we set goals for the region, how can we do better at measuring progress, noting our achievements, or identifying those places where we're not hitting the mark?
Councilmember Johnson.
So I have a quick question on this. So Greater MSP has the dashboard, right, for our region's economic framework that we're part of and in partnership with CEI. So there's a role I think that we should actively be playing in R, because we've got a lot of the data that will feed into that. And so I think we have to look externally at the goals for the region, which we are fully committed to in partnership. But then I think we have to look within our organization as well on the goals that we can directly impact. So, you know, working to be a strong partner with data, being not simply transactional, but transformational in our own work, so that whether it's for our employees internally or externally to the broader goals of the region, we work on both tracks and they should intersect. And what the dashboard doesn't measure, then, you know, we should be measuring what's important to us, as Reva said earlier, right? And you know, figure out the metrics behind, you know, what we know and what we don't know to get to those goals, and start charting our data to progress to goal.
Councilmember Vento.
I think one of the things, this isn't a analytical sort of way of assessing and measuring, but I think some structured conversations with city councils and township boards, city and township administrators, engagement with them to get feedback from them as to their perspective on how we're measuring up would be valuable. I sometimes, well, I don't sometimes, I regularly get anxious that there's this kind of top-down sort of perspective. And I don't like that perspective. I want it to be a partnership and we're equals. And so I think to the extent that we can create conversations with them where we formally make asks for feedback, but also just from time to time when they've got something they want to tell us, that they feel free to tell us what we're doing well, what we need to improve, what we ought to quit doing, what we ought to think about doing. They could very likely provide some great insights as it relates to diversity and inclusion. They may have some expertise and experiences that could really guide us. So just a thought.
I wrote down, I hope this is okay, 360-degree feedback.
Mm-hmm.
Councilmember Wolf.
Thanks. Being a long-term planning agency, a lot of the dashboard stuff that we measure isn't actually our work so much, because what we do, I mean, even like, the Dayton Council put together Thrive 2040, and now this council has been approving people's plans under Thrive 2040, and now it's going to start being implemented, but the actual outcomes aren't known for some years. So yeah, we have our dashboard that we take credit for certain things or measure certain things, but our work is so long term that sometimes those dashboard things aren't really meaningful because they're measuring what we did 5-10 years ago rather than what we're doing now, if that makes any sense. I think we don't do enough acknowledging the long-term things that we've made huge differences in, like our sewer system not having any combined sewer overflows when the rest of the country has them on a regular basis, because we took the long-term look, and having a sewer system that actually works for everybody in the region, as opposed to some other regions where low-income areas might have not the same infrastructure that a higher income area would have.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee.
1 second, I'm going to switch paper. Hang on. 2 seconds. This will be the fun part of the evening. You get to see me scramble.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Rochelle. I wanted to second what Sue said earlier, and I think something very important, basic that we have to be very thoughtful about is asking the right questions, and be thoughtful about asking thoughtful questions on how we lead and facilitate conversations. And our very power sometimes is the ability to set the table, to invite people to convene, and also some of our programs and policies take effect in real time. We know that some programs out there that subsidize people for different kinds of things, some kinds of public assistance, for example, measure or tied to folks proving that they are a part of our transportation assistance program or TAP program, for example. And so we have to be conscious and thoughtful about how these programs kind of affect the other programs out in our society. And so I think an important role that we play is to convene and to ask the right questions.
Thank you. Anyone else have thoughts about measures?
Yeah, the disaggregated data ties into this. Did I miss that somewhere? I think that's...
It's probably on my other sheet.
Yeah, but I think it also ties into this question for measurement. We need to understand where the disparities lie. And the disaggregated data shows us that. Is it lying within subsets of groups or certain groups? The data will help us see that so that our goals are targeted towards the needs.
Thank you. Any other thoughts on how we better measure to meet our goals, and how do we do that in a way that's meaningful to the people we serve?
Councilmember Johnson, go ahead.
Thanks. Again, I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again. I think that as we're measuring, because I really appreciate the things that we're doing, because if it's a goal and you don't measure it, it's not important to you then. If you're going to get somewhere, you need to make it important, measure it, and track it. But also then as we're doing our work, and as an example, bringing on a new transit route or a new housing program, I want to see the overlays in the maps or in the narratives that say, and here's how we are going to achieve this goal when it comes to ending racism, closing gaps, because we have built in process into our decision making that takes that into account. My biggest concern is institutions are very good at doing what they've always done and patting themselves on the back and hoping for different results. And I want to say that, okay, if we're going to add a new line, or if there's going to be a new extension of sewer, or if we're going to do a new program around the environment, how then does that directly have a line to the goals that we're trying to achieve?
Anyone else?
Great.
Councilmember Lee, your hand is up. Was that from before, or did you have something else you wanted to say? I guess it was from before. Anybody else?
Well, some of these comments really have led us into one of the other areas that I kind of pulled out from not only the previous discussion, but from the comments in the Mentimeter. So to the point of kind of the pace of change, the creative thinking outside of the box, how do you think we could embed the concept of fail fast and fail often? Are you guys familiar with that? It came up in my head as I was reading some of the responses, and just the fact that during this pandemic, we really did pivot super fast, probably faster than we've had in the past. And so wondering what you guys think about that concept of fail fast, fail often, and how that might play a role in creative thinking, pace of change, thinking outside the box.
Go ahead, Councilmember Cummings.
Thank you. I think that's really an important point, Sarah. I think that, we saw in 2020, we had to, it wasn't an option to think about it. It's so easy. We're such a big engine and such a powerful engine. We just kind of keep going down the tracks the same way. But 2020 forced us to do things differently, to look at things differently, to pivot. But it's back to using our resources in a way that is most important, and being able to use, all the pivot, being able to use Metro Mobility to transport essential workers, or the food shelves, and all of those things we were able to do it. I don't know where those ideas came from, but they certainly were terrific. So I think we need to analyze where did a lot of the change in direction that happened so quickly, where did that come from? And we need to foster that. We need to encourage that. Everything is not going to be a home run, but we need to be able, we plan so far out. And yet, as we have seen, dynamics change very quickly. And it doesn't always have to be as dramatic as a pandemic. It can be other things, but our world is changing so quickly. We've got to be able to change more quickly along with it. So that creative thinking that allows us, and again, it goes back also, I think, to the point that's made a few times. We are in a unique position as conveners, and we need to use that to also figure out how to pivot, how to change, how to respond, how to fall down, pick ourselves back up. And it may be different from one area to another. It may not be universally, this is the way it's got to be for everybody, because, and as Sue said, instead of being top down, let's be responsive on a smaller scale as we need to be. But I that's just critical. We can't make a plan and execute it and expect that it's going to be successful. We've got to be able to make these changes quickly and get the input that we need to be able to make it. I think we need to find more ways to convene more people, more organizations, more groups, again, as our world changes. The trust factor is huge, and the lack of trust is huge. And so how do we engage those who don't trust and perhaps are not availing themselves of what we can do within the community? We need to have that support from more organizations, from more groups, big and small, and think more globally. Done.
Thank you. Councilmember Fredson.
Sorry, one sec. Okay, I'm set.
Yep, I'd say just a couple things. One is, I think that there's a hesitance or concern about landing on the front pages as a council, as an agency, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, right? Like, I'm on the receiving end of a lot of phone calls and emails about electric buses right now. I think others are too, and I certainly think that the council's commitment to going electric is a good risk to take. I also think that the decision that we made in Transportation Committee on last Monday was the right decision to make, and despite receiving a ton of calls and emails, I think when we explain it to folks, they understand, and the more they understand about our decision making and priorities, I think the more they believe in us as an organization. And then the other thing that I would say is just whatever we can do to empower, incentivize, reward our employees for having ideas and testing out ideas, and even if they're not successful, I mean, even if they fail, I think the more ideas you try out, you're bound to find that some work. And so whatever ways we can sort of provide Met Council employees the opportunity to, and staff, to try out new ideas would be a step in the right direction.
Thank you. Councilmember Lilligren and then Councilmember Wolf. Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thank you. And so the original question around sort of fail fast, fail often concept, and I think that, taking risks or trying something new, and failure is inherent in success, and I think that's fine. And to make sure that we're building into that sort of into our
Michelle,
process.
You might want to mute.
Thanks. That we're building into our process the opportunity for iteration, for learning. This kind of goes back to what Councilmember Cummings was talking about, but that we're not moving so quickly from issue to issue, problem to problem based on our fail fast, fail often, but that we're actually learning from that and embedding ongoing process improvement. Thanks.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wolf and then Councilmember Johnson.
Thanks. We've been entrusted with other people's money. So, risk is okay as long as it's a calculated risk, and that we're willing to accept at some point this isn't working and maybe we need to try something different and not be embarrassed to say this isn't working. Because when we try to pretend like, oh, life is fine, even though that something is clearly a dumpster fire, I won't name examples of that, but it's happened in the past, we lose credibility. And we've got to let our stakeholders, the taxpayers, know why we're doing what we're doing, and be honest with them if something doesn't work. And the buses are a good example of that. I remember talking with Meredith when they had the big press conference about, oh yeah, we're going to do these electric buses, and there was language in there about, working through issues. Well, now we're running right into a brick wall of issues with the electric buses. And I'm glad we're being honest with people, the press or whatever, to say these are the problems that we're having. This isn't that we just decided we don't want to do this. This is not working, and we can't spend twice as much money for something that isn't currently working. That it's important to be honest when stuff doesn't work and stop making a bad decision rather than just we're going to keep going because we said we're going to do it that way.
Councilmember Johnson?
I think that was really important, Wendy, so thanks. That's good. The other thing is are we able to learn from others? Other partners in the region, certainly around the pandemic. There's been just some really cool stuff taking place out there. And, instead of inventing the wheel or reinventing the wheel, what can we adapt and learn from others that have had to come up with innovative strategies, or they've put some risk out there and found great reward. So internally doing it, but then how do we connect with our other partners in the region to kind of leverage what they've learned and then to share what we've learned with them. And the last thing, to the point about the messaging, I think that's really important. I would even say some of our decisions that are just kind of standard operating procedures come out, and I'll be honest, I didn't know we were going to do things, and here we go. So I think managing those communications both internally and externally are really important, so that your council's not caught off guard. I think that's really important, especially if we're going to try to be more on the cutting edge of things. Just keeping everybody in the loop.
Councilmember Lilligren, your hand's up again. Did you want to say something else? Anyone else?
These are all great. I really appreciate the thoughtfulness around this, and I know it's difficult as a government agency to take risk, but sometimes even when the situation doesn't call for it, we should be thinking about risk and taking some chances on the region and the folks in the region. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So as we all know, finances, both structural deficits and for us, and personal financial security for residents is going to play a role in the region. How do we adapt to these conditions, and and what do we do to make sure that we're acknowledging those really tough conversations?
Anyone want to take a stab?
Everybody loves talking about finance, right?
I'll break the ice with this principle of being clear-eyed and I won't say the word honest, but thoughtful and transparent about where financial risk, where on the structured deficits we're facing, and we're certainly these are hard conversations that we're having with our county partners on transitways. I mean, nobody wants to do that, but having our eyes open really is part of the integrity of our communication of our values to ensure that the systems we're investing in can be sustained. So I think that sometimes as a public agency, it's the ethic of transparency is there, but actually being thoughtful to say, this is real, folks, and here's where we are in the next 15, 20 years. And I think that that there's a tendency not want it, kind of like, let's just, the saying is kicking that can, but I think that's where it takes the public courage to be forthright on our financial condition and our financial responsibility. And I think that's something that we should share as a council.
Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. I've been sweating this one for a while because it's a cliff, it's real. In the transit policymaking group, just ahead of this meeting, we had the presentation that went along with the presentation that we're required to give to the legislature that has a 10-year horizon to 2030. You know, we need to, and long reports are very good because they've got all the facts, but we need to also, to your point, Mr. Chairs, get this out in the public so that, you know, it's almost, how do I say this carefully? It feels almost irresponsible to continue to plan for things when we know that we don't have solutions to fund them yet. And so that's about managing expectations, but it's about getting real. So I think, and we talked about this in the meeting ahead of this, and I spoke with Judd at length about this, but I think it's really good to get these kinds of things in front of a committee of the whole, because I'm not sure we're all at the same, I had to do some digging and learning, and that's fine. But I think this is so important. If we don't get, if this council right now doesn't figure this out, it's really going to impact all of our other goals. And so while the reports are very good, you know, in my mind, I'm like, God, I wish we had billboards, and I wish we could get it out there where people understood what's at risk and how it puts at risk our equity work. It puts at risk our growth work. It puts at risk our economic development and economic growth and prosperity work, everything. And, you know, we want to get ahead of that too, so it doesn't get politicized. So I think, you know, we're kind of that council that's, you know, at that moment of time in our path where we have to decide how we're going to proceed. And I think we really need to get everybody up to speed and equipped to, you know, deliver the messages within our districts and to all the constituents we serve and to the media, and work together on that. You know, because it won't get solved in this legislative session. And you're right, Mr. Chair, nobody's doing it intentionally kicking the can, but collectively by just kind of hoping and wishing and praying and lobbying and ticking off our partners and them ticking off us, we just do. We kick the can down the road, and there's a real danger that we aren't going to be able to come out of this.
Thank you. I was in on that meeting and heard your concern on that, and I'm glad that this came up as part of this conversation. Other thoughts? All right. Well, I'm going to move on to the next question I have, and this kind of maybe flies a little bit in the face of what our limitations are. But one of the comments on the Mentimeter that stood out to me was someone put in 100% renewable energy. And what I see that is, and I'm sure there's a date attached to that I don't know, but what I see that is one of those quote unquote moonshot goals. And it inspires, it's credible, it's imaginative. And just wondering what you all think about where somebody could mute. I'm getting a lot of feedback. Wondering where else we can put our stake in the ground around, you know, what are some of the other areas where we could have some sort of a moonshot goal? This is where the big ideas come out.
Anyone have a big dream? Something you'd love to see happen? Councilmember Cummings and then Councilmember Vento.
Thank you. I think we slipped on this one a little bit, but one of our goals was to eliminate homelessness among veterans.
Councilmember Vento.
I always come up with these hard to word thoughts. Just shut up. But I would like us to consider when we respond to critics, and I'm thinking right now about the whole biodiesel issue, whether or not there might be some opportunities to invite them to the table to have a conversation rather than to just be recipients of a written response via mail or email. To better understand how the decisions are made, and not to the point where we're not doing the rest of the work that has to be done, but to the point where we're building an understanding about how decisions are made and what the role of the Met Council is and what our limits are. I've been dealing with a constituent resident in my district who is pretty unhappy about an issue. It's been going on for several weeks, and it's hard to help her understand that this isn't so easy. There are no magic wands. So I'm just, I guess it would be good for us to be able to be instructive as we inform people, and to be inclusive, and to realize that there may be some things that we might learn from those individuals that could help us going forward.
Go ahead, Councilmember Johnson.
I would like, as an employer of many people, to make sure that we are equipping our employees, you know, to have opportunity, prosperity, well-being. So, you know, there's been early conversations that, you know, what can we do to help people prepare, you know, for if they want to move into home ownership? What can we do to help people within their careers at Met Council move up so that they have earning potential and wealth building opportunities? What can we do at Met Council to ensure, you know, I need to circle back on this one, but I think in some cases there's a 90-day waiting period for healthcare. I don't like that. I want people to have healthcare. I don't want them to work at Met Council and have any period of time where, you know, they're living on the edge of, God, I hope I don't get sick, right? I guess, you know, if we're gonna try to build equity and opportunity throughout the region, I'd really like to, as an employer ourselves, embrace what can we be doing for the team to close gaps, you know, and I know there's limits because we're government and, you know, we have to follow the rules, but I still believe that as an employer, public sector employer, you know, we want the private sector employers to do this, right? And I think that, you know, there are many good things that we provide for our employees, but what could we be doing better? You know, what could we stand and hold out as this is what we tried and this is what we accomplished for our own team?
If I could just share my own personal story. So in my first 90 days, I threw my back out. And I was working from home in my bed because that was the only way I could function. And I didn't have the option to not be working because I needed to work because I had just gotten the job. So thank you very much. That's I think that's a really important point.
Well, and if I just to just add, you know, we're human beings, things happen. And, you know, I guess, you know, there's a time where, you know, the rules or the laws or the opportunities where employers had this provisionary period, whatever. But, you know, if it makes the difference between somebody being successful and not because a life event happens, I mean, and we're in a pandemic. So if we can't figure it out now, I'm not sure when we would. So, yeah, I don't think people should have to put themselves at risk. And I do know there have been a lot of employers that have shortened that up to immediate healthcare or at the next first of the month you get on it and there's no longer waiting for that kind of a thing. So I don't know, it's one thing we could look at. I know there's a cost associated with it, but I think the dividends would be huge.
Thank you.
Just Councilmember Lee, you have your hand up. Did you want to say something before I call in?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I wanted to second what Councilmember Johnson said. when I first started at my day job at Nexus, it was like that. You don't get medical until the first 60 or 90 days, and then we changed the policy to be immediate. And I like that. And also I wanted to diversify our other contracting and vending goals, whether they're professional services or financial, and go all across the board. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf?
So we're getting into sort of inside the organization, inside baseball kind of stuff. Aren't we talking about our 2050 plan?
We are. But that's okay.
I'm not trying to be mean or anything. I just don't know how our internal operations end up in the regional plan.
Well, and there is a section that was in the last regional plan that talked about some of the elements of how the council could itself implement some of the outcomes that are identified in Thrive. So I think that it's, within that mindset, we could certainly work some of these things into those conversations. But, to your point, it is a regional plan that is for the region and not just for the council.
But I do think that there is, and I think that the 100% renewable energy goal that someone had mentioned in the Mentimeter is an example of leading by example. And I think leading by example should certainly be something we should be thinking about as we're developing the regional plan.
If I may just add, I think that if we aren't as strong as we can be as a team and equip our people to be successful in their lives, that shows up in work every day. We all know that. So all I'm saying is we want to be the best performing team that we can be to support one another, close our own gaps, provide opportunity so that we can do our jobs better for the region and be an example, if possible, of what works. So I understand the nuance, but I think that as we look to serve the region, we're only as good as the team we put out on the field, and hopefully everybody can swing and hit it across the fence. And, that's what I'm looking for.
Thank you. Any other big ideas, moonshot goals, things that you think that we could look forward to in the 2050 horizon? All right. Well,
this is
actually,
Councilmember Fretzen here. I would just say that I feel like we spent a fair amount of time. I can't remember where we were last summer, over the course of one or two sessions, right? Brainstorming different things. And so I remember that we had brainstormed potential goals related to I&I. And so I don't know if we could just sort of revisit the notes from those conversations, because I'm assuming that we're probably missing something from that conversation. And that was like a
for sure. And I do think
whether it was achievable or not.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I do think that for the purpose, that's a great purpose to bring it up, because we do want to refer back to all of the things that you guys have already done over the course of the last couple of years, and make sure that we're including those thoughts and ideas into the plan as we move forward. So thanks for reminding us about that.
Mr. Chair, Sarah and Michelle, I have one more thought. We had quite a robust discussion both at the CDC and at last week's council meeting. And I'd like us to take a look at our relationship with the smaller communities and the townships and whether or not we're meeting their needs. I think it's probably measurable that a lot of the efforts that we have tend to reach more of the larger suburbs, the urban core cities, and some of the folks may kind of feel like a, oh yeah, you too sort of relationship with us. when it comes to a lot of our programs, our grant programs, et cetera. So I'd like us to be intentional about what opportunities there may be out there that they would be interested in, that we could explore with them and create a stronger working relationship that fits within the statutory, but also recognizes that we can't be all things to all people, but we can maybe be better.
All right.
Councilmember Johnson, go ahead.
So just again, thinking of CDC and some of the discussions we've had. So a year and a half ago, when we opened up our housing choice voucher waiting list, we had over 17,000 people apply. 2,000 people sit on that list. We serve about 7,000 families. So there are some numbers across the region that if we wanted to say, cut such and such number in half by such and such date, or, it'd be great if when we open up a waiting list, we don't have 17,000 people in the region who are struggling to find housing. And then even the ones that we have on our waiting list, it takes forever. They could be on that. First of all, they have to win the lottery essentially to get on the list. And then I've heard wait up to 7 years to maybe even be called for a voucher. So I think there are some ways, certainly we have to work with other partners because we don't control the entire region and we don't control the housing stock. But if we're serious about, reducing the numbers of people who are in these situations, we've got numbers that we could put some big, hairy, audacious goals around and challenge our partners out there to continue to work with us to reduce those numbers. And that, assuming, of course, the outcome is people are able to find housing on their own and be successful. Because we're going in the wrong direction on this in a big, fast way.
Councilmember Wolf, go ahead.
Following up, first of all, I wanted to say absolutely to what Councilmember Vento said with the small cities. We're kind of seen as people who, if we have interaction with them, it's to bug them and tell them what to do rather than to help them. And if we can change that dynamic, I think that would be a good thing for the region. But part of the challenge with the waiting lists and whatnot is the way the system is set up, which we don't have a whole lot of say over, because like we have our list, Minneapolis has a list, St. Paul has a list, Dakota County has a list, and people there's lists for different parts of greater Minnesota. People sign up for, there are some people who sign up for every single list. So that 17,000 people might be on 10 different lists and trying to get into the lottery in all of those different places. Plus we open it up to the rest of the country as well, up to like 15% of the people or something. I can't remember what the number was. So that those numbers don't work well to kind of talk about the size of the problem, other than how goofy the whole system is that you have to sign up to these different lists all over the region and all over the country trying to get on a list. And would I like to change that? Yes. Is the 2050 plan the place to do that? Probably not.
Any other thoughts?
Well,
Councilmember Gonzalez. Oh, sorry. Councilmember Gonzalez first, and then we'll come back to you, Councilmember Johnson.
All right, thank you. I was just thinking about what Sue Vento just said about the smaller communities feeling disconnected. I agree with that. I heard that many times before here in Washington County. I actually heard people that say to me that they feel more comfortable walking down downtown Baghdad when they were deployed there with the Army than in downtown Minneapolis, which is ridiculous. But that's the type of misconceptions that we have. And I definitely, the smaller communities feel ignored. But I think it's part because, and there's a lot of truth to it, but I think if we could have them feel part of the region, and have them understand why sometimes we seem to be focusing so much on Minneapolis or St. Paul and not so much on the smaller communities. It's because there's a reason, and more important, there's a benefit for the smaller communities too. So that was a long preamble of saying that if we could be a place in which we could foment or increase that spirit of unity across the region, by helping both the large cities and the smaller communities understand each other and understand their issues, and also realize that we are in this together, and that if we can play a role in fostering that cross understanding, I think that will be one of our that will be a great accomplishment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
I'm going to bring it back to housing again. If we have eliminate homelessness among veterans, which I'm all for, and the governor's behind, and we're measuring it. So it's being measured, it's a goal, and we're seeing progress. I think other people who are struggling around housing instability and homelessness, we should put some parameters out there. So homelessness in general is a problem, although across the state for the past 10 years, it's kind of remained a bit constant, but unsheltered homelessness has spiked up dramatically in the last 2 years. And those numbers are before COVID. So, we see those clients in our systems. So I think that because we are reacting with programs and effort and applying positive pressure to all of that, there's got to be a way that we can work on a big goal with others. And I know that there are, thank you to Councilmember Lilligren and others who are part of the, group to end homelessness, but within our systems, again, what could we say? We want to put a stake in the ground for what we're seeing, and how can we partner then with others to measure it, prioritize it, and see positive progress?
Thank you. Councilmember Vento.
Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Cummings brought this up, and I tried to ask a question at CDC the other night that didn't make any sense to me as I was asking it, and didn't get any better thinking about it as I went to sleep that night and woke up the next morning. So I had some good email exchanges with Lisa Barajas and Terry Smith. I've got a handle on what we do as a council as it relates to affordable housing and the efforts we make as it relates to addressing the homeless issue. But I don't feel like I have a really strong sense of what's going on regionally. And I know that's hard to corral because there are so many different partners. But if there was some place where we could get just a better picture of it, I'm a puzzle person, and I get that we're a big piece of the puzzle, but I'm concerned about the other pieces and where we're overlapping effectively, where we're not overlapping effectively, where the gaps are. How, to the extent that there are so many players, is that contributing to the challenge? I don't know, but it's a question that's really been weighing on me, and especially now that we're dealing with this pandemic, I think that it's going to continue to be challenging. And so to the extent that we could maybe help be part of the solution on this, I think it would be great.
Councilmember Lilligren?
Yeah, thanks. And just continuing the conversation, building on what Councilmember Johnson said, Councilmember Cummings, I think it was about ending unsheltered homelessness. And I think the goal to end unsheltered homelessness amongst veterans is a very worthy one, and one where there has been demonstrable progress, even if there's been some slippage lately. And I think that's kind of something that a lot of folks look toward, the progress in ending unsheltered veteran homelessness, because it was such a coordinated effort, aligned resources, aligned strategies, and it's a good model. And I think if we're looking out to 2050, I think putting a stake in the ground, ending unsheltered homelessness in the region, I think is more sort of a big idea. And, we have the efforts around veteran unsheltered homelessness as a model, and this whole conversation, very active, roiling conversation about regionalization of these efforts and kind of getting to what Councilmember Barbento was saying, sort of coordinated data, coordinated entry, coordinated efforts. And so that would be my big thing, to put a stake in the ground and for 2050 is ending unsheltered homelessness in the region. And I think it's doable. And the other just housing related thing where I feel like our policies, resources, and actions could have impact would be in the equity area of creating parity of home ownership across demographics, across races in our region. Again, a big thing, but I think a worthy goal for 2050 that we could actually impact. Thanks.
Any other thoughts? Councilmember Cummings? You're muted, Councilmember Cummings.
Okay, Sarah, I didn't want you to feel alone, and so
I appreciate that. Thank you.
yeah, sure. I often wonder, and I think we haven't talked about it a whole lot, but the Met Council, with many of our partners, has a lot of land that we are not doing anything with. The excess parcels from this or that, partnering with the county, MnDOT. I know that there are lots of pieces of the pie that make up this ownership of property. Can we explore using that in some way to incentivize developers, give them the land to build housing, give them something to incentivize building on some of the excess that we no longer need, rather than just banking all this property that may or may not ever get used. But it seems to me that the need is so great, and that would be something that we should look into for providing a way to build more and develop more low-income housing in different areas of the region.
Anything else? All right. Well, I'm going to start transitioning us to kind of the last topic of the night, which is, how do you want to be a part of the Metropolitan Development Guide? What role do you want to play? And I want to start off with asking, what are our best opportunities to build relationships where you see that we have gaps?
This is Riva. I think we need to have maybe more people involved in legislative action and activities, because that's where our guidelines come from. And a lot of times by the time those guidelines get to us, there are restrictions that we have to work within. And if we can impact the legislature to open up some of those restrictions, so that we can be supportive of our goals and have more impact.
Sorry, I'm muting so that I don't get feedback. Councilmember Wolf, please.
I just wanted to hear more about these restrictions, and I'm not sure if I understand the comment.
Well, like we have statutes. A lot of times we have ideas and we're told, well, we don't have a mandate for reducing disparities, or we're not able to utilize the funds in this way because of the state statute or, of course, federal statute, but that's not within our control. So that's what I'm talking about. If we can partner with the people who are making our statutes and who are funding the things that we care about, we might be more successful in achieving our goals.
Several of you have commented tonight about partnering with smaller communities and townships in the region, and we heard in the meeting in January about making sure that we have intentional partnerships with our local government partners. Are there others that you'd like to call out more specifically, or ways that you'd like to call those out more specifically? Councilmember Wolf?
I think it's important that we take a lot of input from elected officials at the county and city and township level, but also making sure that we hear from developers, because they can tell us when things are getting in the way of good developments or causing things to cost more money for no particular reason. I mean, they'll say that about SAC, and I can explain to them why we have to have SAC, but finding the ways where the rules as they are in place might be inhibiting better development, that sort of thing.
Councilmember Johnson?
So I've heard also along those lines, Michelle, and to what Wendy said and everything, but I've heard, well, we're good conveners. And COVID is certainly a different way that we're convening. In some ways we can get more input because you can be anywhere, but it's pretty rare that anybody would ever show up at one of our meetings, inside council chambers, because everything's kind of 11th hour. But if we really were conveners, if we really could partner and bringing in, metro cities, small cities, and holding some summits of some sort, and whatever, goals that we've got in common with them, or things that we want to do better with them or for them, really convening those partners where we build the relationships between our staffs too. So it's good to have policymaker to policymaker, but then making stronger connections with staff. And I know staff already has wonderful relationships across the region, but I too, in my communities here where they feel like they're a one-off, they benefit greatly from some things at Met Council, but they don't feel like a lot of it really pertains to them. So maybe, I don't know if it's with the counties or metro cities or chambers of commerce, but, pulling disparate partners together to talk about the things that we're working on and trying to do together, and where are the gaps, and how can we help people, and how can they help us? Maybe that's happening. I haven't experienced that at all. And, I know we have workshops. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about big thinking so that we can get aligned, and then work plans that would fit that, and get the feedback, that transparency thing, and really listen to some of the positive criticism that they might have for us, right?
Yeah, well, efforts like this are definitely ripe for that kind of conversation. So I appreciate that point of view. Thank you.
Michelle, I'd just say too, I think, when you go meet sort of some of the mayors in some of the smaller cities, and, I think a lot of them feel like we are trying to tell them what to do, which maybe we do to a certain extent, but, thinking about cities that have 1,000 residents and trying to layer over sort of an affordable housing thought perspective, I think for a lot of them just doesn't make any sense. So I think really thinking maybe differently around some of these smaller communities, and obviously I have a lot of them, and what we're asking them to do. It very much seems like a waste of money to have somebody that hasn't built a new house or doesn't have a single business in their city to do the same, any much of a regional planning piece, right? They could just say nothing's changed, send us what they did last time. Maybe there's a few very, very simplified view that we want. The other thing we don't do, I don't think, in some of these areas, and I think again around Lake Minnetonka, is take a more of a regional perspective of that area. So if you think of I&I, you think of a number of other areas that are quite important to us. Trying to encourage an area to have a more of a local but region, a smaller region, a number of cities coming together to view some of those issues in a cooperative way. And maybe there's not spots for affordable housing in all the cities, but maybe there is a spot somewhere in one of the cities that it makes sense, and we can work with them on that, so that people don't feel like they're contributing all their money into us and then none of it is coming back to that area. But that was just something we heard I heard loud and clear meeting with a number of the mayors, just that I think they view it. We're very focused on Minneapolis and St. Paul and maybe some of the other bigger outer ring cities, and then the rest of the cities sort of have to fit into the same mold that those cities are in.
So I put a comment up there, just by districts, ? Those smaller areas that you're talking about. So I just wanted to put that out there as something I thought as you were having that idea. Other gaps outside of local government, smaller communities. Who are our gaps? Where are we not building relationships that we should be?
This is Reva. Just having, how we got partnership with the Center for Economic Inclusion, expanding that partnership, some partnership with policymakers to work with staff and council members. It's come up a couple times in this discussion that we need to rely on other experts and get information from other entities rather than trying to do the work ourselves, or not having the diversity of opinions and information and expertise.
Thank you. Councilmember Lee and then Councilmember Vento.
Thanks, Michelle. I know the staff who are working on the construction programs did open house in the last year or two with folks who want to learn more about how they can be a vendor in the construction programs. And I think we should have more interactions in the town halls at that level of prospective vendors and folks to better understand how they could be a part of our ABE and DPE goals.
Thank you. Councilmember Vento and then Councilmember Lilligren.
As life evolves in the next several months, and as we hopefully start to come back together for in-person meetings, I think we need to intentionally find time to work, to have these kinds of conversations at committee of the whole, and kind of reconnect with each other. We were council members for a year and partners for a year. We got to build close relationships with the folks that we're on committees with, but otherwise we've lost a year in terms of those relationships. And I think it'll be important for us going forward for the rest of our term. And I apologize because Murphy has some thoughts about this too. I'll turn it off.
Nobody likes that we've lost a year.
Right. Councilmember Lilligren, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. And kind of building on a lot of the conversations about engaging smaller communities, and to Councilmember Wolf's point about engaging developers or people who are actually doing the development. And, a lot of this, so I represent, most of my district is in Minneapolis. I have one suburban community, Robbinsdale, who's very organized about their their sort of planning and future and development. And so a lot of this kind of relates to capacity and things. And I remember even during my application and interview for this appointment, talking about these very hyper-local efforts to sort of do these, sort of district or corridor sort of visioning and design efforts are often the first step in generating some of the other critical policy pieces that a local community needs to realize that vision. And in Minneapolis, a lot of emphasis has been put since the last comp planning on cultural corridors, cultural districts, and that's become kind of an umbrella. There's interest in philanthropy and in this kind of hyper-local community-driven development, so they funded broader than just Minneapolis, but sort of informal cohorts of these cultural districts, cultural corridor efforts. And I suspect that even smaller communities, and this may happen more through their city councils or town councils or and through their municipal infrastructure, are doing these very hyper local design efforts, economic development, community development design efforts. And so I think being deliberate about tapping into those efforts, and they're going to look a little different in different communities, depending, they're going to be called different things, but but they're out there, they're there. And so it kind of goes to, the developers in a community, as Councilmember Wolf was talking about, they're there in that conversation. Policymakers, the planning departments, to the extent that there are planning departments in some of the smaller communities, the interested community members who are interested in planning are there. And so I feel like those are built-in opportunities to engage communities around long-term visioning and planning, done by the local people who are most impacted, whether that's core city or a smaller community.
That's a really good point. It's something that in my engagement history and my outreach history is always, what can we snap onto? Where can we go that's already there? Because it's hard to get people together. People are busy. People are committed to a lot of different things. So how can we take advantage of the where they're already gathering and snap onto that? So thank you.
You all raised your hands at the same time, so I'm going to go Cummings, Wolf, and Johnson. Cummings, please.
Thank you. Just briefly, a couple places that I would like to see us engage more deeply with is the faith communities and our philanthropic organizations.
I'm sorry, Molly, I missed that.
The faith communities and philanthropic
thank you.
Organizations, both for input, for their expertise, for their ability to convene, for everything that we may, as Robert has said, and Michelle, you just echoed, but in going deeper with those resources that are available to us, and I think that we don't leverage them as well as perhaps we could.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Wolf?
Thank you. So I'm thinking back to 2011 when we started the process for the 2040 plan and did all of the figuring out, where are people going to want to live and how are they going to get around and what are they going to do for recreation and yada, yada, yada. And now those plans are going into effect based on what we projected 10 years ago. But this last year has changed everything, turned everybody's preferences on their heads. People are moving to different kinds of places. They're traveling different. They're working different. Everything is different. And we need to understand all of those differences and what that means for the long term before we can get into any of the weeds that we're getting into right now. And I don't know how long it's going to take us to figure out how life is changing permanently.
Great. I know there's quite a bit of work being done to try and get our hands around some of those things, but you're right that the results are probably going to be a little bit playing out a little bit differently than they would, right away, right? So we need to know
a lot differently.
Yep. Councilmember Johnson.
So actually, my comments relate to Councilmember Cummings and Councilmember Wolf. So I agree. I'd like to, understand, McKnight just rolled out their new, they were like community priorities, and so they've got a whole new set now of where they're putting their money into community and equity and sustainability and all of that, right? So or Minnesota and St. Paul Community Foundation, or the POLAD Foundation, who's all about ending homelessness. But I'm just echoing, there are some really important foundations that have in recent years done a turn, and I think what they're putting out as goals align really well with ours. So I'd like to better understand, as they're putting money into projects, nonprofits, partnerships, where is there any alignment in the work we're doing, right? So even around trying to increase, minority-based businesses working on Met Council projects and increasing people into careers, I just have a feeling that there's got to be some foundations out there, Minneapolis Foundation or whoever, right, that you might want to know more about this. I don't know if we communicate with them, that I think there could be some synergy. And then to Councilmember Wolf's comments about the world changing 100%, I think that if we interact with the chambers of commerce, and because there are small chambers of commerce to get to those small city priorities, right? And they're very connected with their small businesses, but all the way up to the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, St. Paul Chamber, and everything in between. Again, I would say a lot of those chambers align really well with what we're trying to do, and they have the business community sitting there. And most businesses don't want to have to interact with government unless it's really necessary. But I think there's a way for us to tell our story about what we're trying to do and show that we align with them. And that might eventually help to go to the point that was made earlier by Riva and others about having more voices around legislative action to get things done, because everybody's voice carries weight in a different way. And then about how life is changing, I think to the point that was made about the small cities and how Councilmember Lilligren was talking about the city of Robbinsdale and the work that they're doing. I mean, that's where the intel lies about how life is changing. And another group, and we all know it because we probably all get the emails, at least I do, like the Minneapolis Realtors. But the Realtors are really all over about housing patterns, and it's in real time, and Housing First, the Builders Association of the Twin Cities, now Housing First. So there's just some really good partners out there that have expertise and are fast figuring out what's going on, and maybe our stuff is already connected. I know we are in so many levels, but even if at the policymaker level, at their membership level, if there's a way that we can, I think a lot of us, when we applied to be on Met Councils, said that we want to meet people where they're at. So how do we meet the business community? How do we meet the philanthropic community, the religious community, the neighborhood groups, to show up and get them to know more about us, and then we can just align our priorities as best as possible, I guess.
Yeah, that's great. I think it really defines the roles really well in terms of staff to staff versus policymaker to policymaker, and the impacts that those relationships can have. So pivoting from that, I want to talk about what are some of the ways that you would like to be involved in this process, and in doing some of these things that we've talked about in the development of the plan. How would you like to have your hands in this plan?
I'll just add that we've heard you'd like some conversations here at Committee of the Whole. So, that is certainly a place that we can start to, bring additional information and start to have some big questions. You've talked about engaging more directly in your districts, which is something that we'll definitely be talking to you more about. Are there other things that you'd like to see or do during this process that relate to some of your specific expectations? Councilmember Pinto.
I think it would be good to include updates in the chair's daily report, to the extent that not all of us will be involved all of the time. Our ability to stay informed as to what's happening so that if we've got questions or ideas, we can follow up and just stay connected with it. I am excited to play any kind of a role I can play in terms of planning, executing, following up, and staying out of the way to the extent that that might be beneficial too.
Councilmember Wolf?
Thanks. I would love to be involved all the way down into the weeds if you'll let me, but I don't know that I'm supposed to be there. But I want to make sure that we get good public discussion about what's going on, and also in places where it's about real life stuff rather than just, I mean, this has been just sort of general feeling discussion, but when we're talking about real life stuff, looking at the last plan and what worked and what didn't and what we've learned from the last one, because we have a 2040 plan and we're supposed to sort of build upon that for the 2050 plan, not just throw the whole thing out and start over again. So looking at what's working and what's not working with examples for council members to understand as we're going through this, so that we don't just keep making the same mistakes, I think is important, that we learn what worked and what didn't work.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be, I think, a good thing to maybe have a meeting on and talk about kind of like where are we in a progress standpoint to the 2040 plan. That could be a really good discussion to have.
Other thoughts?
Places where you would specifically like to be involved. Topic areas that you would like to be involved with. Are you willing to lead discussions, or would you just like to be a participant and listen?
Go ahead.
I can do any of the above. So far today, we haven't really talked about our core responsibilities. We've talked about all of the things that we'd like to do that aren't necessarily our core responsibilities, but I want to be mindful of the things that we're actually required to do as part of this plan. Our systems, regional systems areas that we need to work on. And I'd be willing to take whatever role you need me to take in terms of leading a meeting, just participating within the council, outside the council, whatever.
Councilmember Barber?
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, I've been kind of in and out today, so I've had juggling a couple of things, so I haven't been as active in the discussions, but similar to Wendy, I'd be happy to take any role and be involved to the extent possible. Certainly, some of the themes I've heard about outreach to smaller communities is very important to me. I think that's kind of a critical thing, both how we engage them as we develop the next plan. And then certainly I have obviously a keen interest in transportation and transit, so things along those lines I'd like to be involved with.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Johnson?
I'm happy to do whatever as well. Lead, listen, follow, corral, nudge, whatever you need me to do. What I would think would be really handy, because I do get asked, to have a speaker come from Met Council to, present on this, that, or the other thing, which I can do to a degree. But, after we've kind of figured out from all of this that we're talking about, and not forgetting those core responsibilities, certainly those have to be foremost. But if there could be kind of like, at least this would be helpful for me, we could have a set of topics that we kind of have a bit of a canned presentation that we can take out on the road and offer to, whether it's the League of Women Voters or our group of mayors that meets, or the Chamber of Commerce, or a city in particular. It'd be nice to know, here's what we've got around wastewater, here's what we're trying to do on housing, or here's the thing around transportation that we're working on, just because I know I go to Hannah and she's great, she can get me a sheet on something or whatever, but I often would like to just ask the group, so what are you guys interested in? Because here are the things that we can quickly pull some stuff together, and hopefully it would relate to what we're talking about here tonight. A bit of a menu for almost a speaker's bureau, but that's not the right word. But like, here are the 10 things that, we've got stuff ready to go that is emerging or impacting your area. Which of these would you like to learn more about?
So I'm going to put a word to it, Councilmember Johnson. You can tell me if it's right or wrong, but I think of this as a content library. It's something we talk about quite frequently, and we in fact just talked about it today. But yes, we should have those things turnkey, and we agree 100%. And I think to put resources towards that kind of a resource would be really helpful for all of you as you are going out into your communities.
I think it'd be nice to just add it to those emails that go out every now and then to our elected and appointed officials, so that they could get an idea of getting us on agendas. And I know we get invited in. And the other thing I would say, going back again to the legislative stuff, I know we get legislative briefings. We've got a great team doing that. But man, oh man, in the city world, we had our top priorities on a one-pager, and we were all briefed on it so that we could talk about it, tweet about it, visit about it, right? And so I appreciate the updates that we get when we get them, but sometimes I'm a bit lost and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what is this about? So I just would appreciate that. And if I've missed it along the way, I'm sorry, but to the point that was made earlier, what are the things that we need to be top of mind with our community members, so that they understand what our priorities are, to help gain people supporting our priorities with the relationships they have with legislators.
To your point about resources to take to meetings and to talk with folks about, when we did the last regional plan, we definitely had a sort of a standard presentation that had some questions that were either topic based or other things that you could use. So this is definitely the time to start putting that information into your standard communications, but also equipping you so that you can do that when you're out talking to folks. It doesn't have to be super formal. It can just be, I'm going to this meeting next week. Is there something related to either the work that we're doing or the regional plan that we can raise and get some feedback from folks on? And that's 100% what we'll be planning to do for you.
Would anyone want to do a 5-minute Ignite presentation on a topic in which they're passionate about and explaining it, so that it's not always just staff explaining it, but our policymakers are out there? Just an idea I had. I can see everyone's really jumping on that one.
We'll work on it. They're fun, but they're kind of scary. Oh, Councilmember Barber says yes, she would do that.
Yes.
Johnson will
take her. I love it.
Well, I'm happy to help.
I think it could be fun. We could do videos. Other thoughts? Ways you'd like to be engaged and involved in the development of the plan?
Go ahead, Councilmember Gonzalez.
Thank you. Just on the flip side of what Councilmember Johnson was saying about the handouts for topics to present to the communities, that's an idea that the flip side of that was how we can get feedback directly from the communities as to what they want to hear from us. And I was working with Peter on developing a survey to send to all our city and townships in my region, just with that idea, just to hear from them what are the pressing issues that they have in mind, and then collate that data and say, well, this is what the top 5 issues that were identified by all the cities and townships of Washington County, and then address that with a more get staff data, etc. But I think that getting input directly from the communities as to what they think they want to hear from us should also be part of this. But doing it in a structured fashion, just like we were talking about the presentations from us, but structure in the same way to get their feedback. So doing it periodically or having a website in which people can, jurisdictions can put their opinions, whatever. But again, that should be part of what we're talking about.
Thank you. That's the idea. Yes, that's well highlighted. Thank you. Councilmember Lilligren.
Yeah, thanks. And to the earlier question about doing an Ignite presentation, and that was kind of where Councilmember Wolf was, where I wasn't sure what that meant. Googled it, and I have heard of them. So 5-minute presentation, 20 slides. That
Very
event every 15
focused.
seconds. Very focused.
Very focused on a specific topic.
Yeah, so I think that sounds cool. To the question of how do you want to be involved, however it works. But now that you brought up this Ignite presentation idea, I mean, it does seem a way of getting diverse regional perspectives on comprehensive planning kind of out there in a rapid and interesting way, hopefully interesting. And this kind of goes to Councilmember Gonzalez's point earlier about sort of developing, growing, having a sense that we are a region, whether you're a large core city or a small rural community. And so into the question of how to be involved, however it's useful, I mean, like some of the other council members that have spoke before, any way that it's useful for me to be involved. But one way kind of right now as the idea of kind of being a conduit, not just out to the communities I represent, but back to the Met Council. And, Minneapolis has a robust planning function and department. I think what they did on their last round of comprehensive planning to go deeper into the research and create a narrative around, let's say, equity and what contributed to some of the inequities that we see today. And I thought that was really cool. And they did it in other areas as well, where there was research that then established the underpinnings of their plan. And that's something that not all communities in the region have the capacity to do, but there are elements of that they may be interested in. And I remember when I was first presented on the methodology at the city of Minneapolis for their conference, I was really impressed. And I thought it was super cool. And I think, I said, is this something that can be shared with other communities? Is this, and not that everyone should do it just like Minneapolis did or anything like that, but there are pieces of that could be looked at if you're interested in equity. Here's some potential research questions you can ask yourselves, your communities, or here's some methodology. And so sort of playing this role of carrying that, a community that I represent, Minneapolis, that has resources to put into a function like that, but then can share some of what they've learned with other parts of the region, not in a prescriptive way, not in saying do it just like Minneapolis, but in a way that may help build sort of a sense of a regional dialogue.
Thank you. There's no doubt that this is cool and it can be cool, and we have opportunities to make it cool. So we'll work on it. Other thoughts here as in the last few minutes of our meeting? Go ahead, Councilmember Bento.
I missed part of what Robert was saying, and I apologize, but I just found out that I got my COVID appointment, my vaccination appointment scheduled. So Susan, celebrating that. I know you're looking and thinking, oh, she's not old enough to qualify for the COVID vaccination. And bless you for that. But I'm currently enrolled in the tribal state relations training, and I can't even begin to describe how much I am just loving this training experience, how much I'm learning about it. And it's really giving me some insights that transcend to some extent, well, transcend anything I've learned in a long, long, long time. And because this is an opportunity that we as council members have, and because I heard both council member Cummings as well as Chair Zelli rave about what great training this is, I just want to encourage everybody to think about it the next time there's an opportunity to enroll. It's really opened my eyes and ears and heart and brain in a way that I haven't experienced in a long, long time. So I just wanted to make that pitch.
I would echo that. I've been through the training as well, and it was transformational. Any other thoughts as we near our 6 o'clock hour? I very much appreciate your attention and your ideas and your thoughts. This has been a great discussion. Robert, I see your hand up. No? You're
Nope.
too tiny. Anyway, I just want to reiterate that this is just a beginning of a conversation, and there was a reason why we took it to big picture thinking. And we do understand that it's not, there are some fundamental things that we need to meet as part of our requirements by the state, by the federal government, et cetera. But how often do we get to do pie in the sky? So I think this was a really good discussion to have and a good place to start. And knowing that we're going to be focusing these down and become more specific and more detailed as we move along. So I just want to thank you for your time and attention and your input. It's been wonderful.
And I'll just, oh, Mr. Chair, before you start, and I'll just say our next steps here really are to start putting specific plans together around not just how we'll engage, but what some of the next elements will be around the planning process. So you'll start to see some more tangible information, and hopefully you'll see what you've said here today and what you've prioritized reflected back to you in those plans. And we'll definitely figure out the process for engaging you more regularly and making sure you get all the updates that you're talking about wanting. So this is such an important foundation, and we're so grateful for the time and attention and really engaged participation. So thank you.
I'm just going to echo that thought and thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Michelle. This has been, and really thank you, everybody who've been engaged in this process. I've been more absorbing, and I talk all day, so this is really a wonderful opportunity to listen to the energy and the interest in just these big planning thoughts. But also, what I've been hearing is all of you wanting to be engaged as well as being ambassadors to both give presentations, or whether it's 5 minutes, Ignite, or something longer, or with other local communities. I mean, I think of a number of things we can do to kind of tighten that up, and also kind of give people more of all of us, more of a sense of what are those legislative priorities, what's happening, rather than the long list. And I know Brooke does a great job, but I think we can kind of bring people up to speed. There is a presentation tomorrow for the governor's budget for those that are interested at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I do have just a little bit of housekeeping. Because I talk so much and I've been so focused on video meetings all day long, I neglected to approve the minutes from the last meeting. So with your indulgence, there's in your packet before meeting minutes from February 3rd. And from the last committee of the whole. So if I could just take another minute and ask for a motion and a second to approve those minutes.
Willigan moves approval.
And there was a second. Thank you, Robert. Who is the second?
Cummings seconds.
Thank you. I was losing audio. And this is really important. We take this vote because Bridget would be coming to my house with a hammer when I get this done. So there she is. So Bridget, call the roll.
Thank you. Councilmember Barber.
Aye.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Aye.
Cummings.
Aye.
Ferguson.
Aye.
Fredson.
Aye.
Gonzalez.
Aye.
Johnson.
Aye.
Johnson said aye.
Aye.
Lilligren,
Aye.
Lindstrom, Lindstrom, Sterner, Sterner, Bento,
Aye.
Wolf, Wolf, Zarin,
Zarin's an aye.
Terzelli.
Aye. That minutes are approved. Thank you all. And the other thing I've been kind of hearing today is, wouldn't it be nice if we could do more in-person meetings, not just with ourselves, but with some of all these partners, stakeholders, and this idea generation and innovation comes from not just formal presentations, but just from general conversations. So I'm really looking forward to that. Sue, I'm so glad you're getting your shot. I had one, so I'm going to get another pretty soon. So then we can, that's a step along the way. I think we all will, really in the next couple months. With that, Sarah, Michelle, thank you. Thank you, all of you, for being so engaged today, and stay tuned. We have more to do, and look forward to seeing you. This meeting is adjourned.
Good evening.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.